Hello everyone, my name is Josh and today I'm going to be talking about the research article of motor skill training and strength training associated with different plastic changes in the central nervous system. So before getting started, this is the contents of my presentation. The numbers on the side don't represent the slide number, they represent more of the order that I'll be talking about things. So the introduction will introduce our researchers and what led up to their questions and what led up to the hypothesis of this study. Methods is going to explain the organization of the research study, what they did, what their trial groups were, what different sort of recordings they were looking for. And the results of the discussion is going to be what they found in the end and what the research truly showed and what future questions they had. Class connection is going to be more of why I chose this article for this course and why I thought they were heavily related. And then future direction and limitations is what more could this research study do in maybe a different aspect of a study, and the limitations is some flaws that I saw that could go for better results, make more accurate results. So for the introduction, our researchers are Jesper Lundby Jensen, Peter Marston, and Jens Nielsen. They were all from the Department of Medical Physiology at the University of Copenhagen in Copenhagen, Denmark. After this study was completed, it was published by the Journal of Applied Physiology back in 2005 on October 1st. So the researchers' hypothesis were motor skill training and strength training are associated with different plastic changes in the central nervous system. For those who don't know, plastic changes refers to the capacity of the nervous system to modify itself, whether it be structurally or functionally, in response to experience an injury. As you're probably learning in your classes or you have learned in the past, this is really just neural adaptations. So in the world of sports, we know that athletes often use a combination of resistance training and skill learning to optimize their performance. It requires some degree of strength and motor skills for the athlete to be successful. One person that came to my mind was Mark Henry. He was a powerlifter back in the 90s, and in the sport of powerlifting, it requires nothing but technique, skill training, and strength training to lift heavier weights and be more successful in the sport. And Mark Henry was one person that came up because he was so successful in the 90s. And by this, we can see that in other studies, these researchers found that plastic changes in the central nervous system are well documented in relation to acquiring new skills. So for the methods, this experiment consisted of 24 healthy volunteers, 11 women and 13 men, excuse me. The participants were randomly assigned to 3 groups, and each group consisted of 8 participants, 5 men and 3 women. In one group, you had a strength training group, and another group, you had a skill training group, and then you had your control group that did not train but participated in the testing. So for those that were training, there were 13 training sessions that were performed 3 days in the week over a 4-week training period. These sessions involve the strength training test, electrophysiological testing, and the training session of either motor skill training or strength training. During training sessions, the TMS was recorded, and after sessions, a recording of the peripheral electrical nerve stimulation of the participant. So I use an abbreviation TMS, which stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation. This is a procedure that uses magnetic fields to stimulate nerve cells in the brain, and this was really important in the study, and we'll see why later. So for the strength test group, at the beginning of the strength test, the subjects were to perform a 1 rep max, and the peak torque of maximal velocity contraction was the determiner. And before the test, each participant had time to warm up as well as instructions to perform the exercise. So for those who know how to do the movement, they were able to warm up, get the blood flowing through the muscles. For those that did not know how to perform the exercise but were healthy, we're given instructions on how to perform a bicep curl. As we see in this figure here, it worked more of the brachialis and the brachioradii and those sort of things. So they were able to perform a bicep curl. And the test continued until failure was reached in a 1 max attempt. So a person doing 20 pounds of a dumbbell curl for 10 reps, that wasn't the test. They would keep progressing upward until they were able to do one. So an increase from 20 to 40 would be what would be shown. The 40-pound bicep curl would be what was recorded. For this completing the strength test, subjects were seated in an armchair for electrical physiological testing procedure involving TMS and the peripheral electrical nerve stimulation. The subjects were positioned in a head-supported chair with the right arm on the cushion and the shoulder joint flexed at 45 degrees and the elbow joint almost flexed. So we're looking at this figure here, the TMS that I talked about earlier. The brain stimulates action potential through the corticomotor neural cells, and it went to the bicep to be able to do the bicep curl, and these were all the things that were recorded, and we'll see this more in the results. So for the skill training group, they performed motor training of the right arm elbow flexors 3 times for 4 weeks, as we explained earlier. I believe that they had a grip, like a stress ball in their hand as they were doing the muscle contraction, and they also had a computer-based program connected to them for measuring biometrics of the elbow joint. In this figure here, it illustrates how the subject was seated and the different screen figures presented by subjects during recording. So after all of this, the results showed that obviously there was no change in the control group, as there was no sort of training in skill learning. There was a bit of a similarity between before the training period and after training period, but what really stood out in this research was that strength training displayed improvement in both maximal and dynamic strength, increasing by 31.2%. This implying that the strength program caused improvements of strength, and that it really goes to show that a strength training workout is really best for strength training. Now for the TMS measurements, this figure was more for the short-term and long-term adaptations to the skill training group. And the results showed that during skill group contractions, there were short-term changes. We look at day 1 to day 14, we can see a lot of a difference between the before training and after training. Excuse me, but as we get from day 1 to day 26, it kind of dies down a little bit as the body is getting used to the contractions that the skill testing group is doing. So furthermore, in this study, it demonstrated the acquisition of the visuomotor skill association with corticospinal excitability over several weeks. It also found that excitability began increasing within the first 2 weeks of training, as we saw in the TMS measurements figure. So this was for skills training. Now for strength training, changes did not occur in relation to strength training. In contrast, the strength training improvements was associated with decreased corticospinal excitability at rest. The findings emphasizing the role of plastic changes in the corticospinal pathway in the acquisition of motor skills. And so with these researchers, after doing this, they had the question of whether similar changes play a role in possible neuronal adaptations to strength training. So why I chose this research article, I just found that this was very connected to this course. This course was all about motor learning, all about how our central nervous system works along with our muscles and our joint receptors and those sort of things. So in Module 5, it explaining the function of the Golgi tendon organs, the muscle spindles, joint receptors, like I said, these different things, as well as the central nervous system, all play a part to function our body in our day-to-day lives. In this figure here, we can see the brain going to the spinal cord circuits, to our muscle spindles, and to our Golgi tendon organs, and back and forth to relay information to each other to the brain. And I thought it was really cool and really important. I also thought in Module 6, which displayed the anatomy of the central nervous system and explained how feedback works. So if something was too heavy, right, these Golgi tendon organs would tell our brain, we can't lift this, let's not do it now. And over adaptions, our Golgi tendon organ would able to adapt to this feedback and able to set a new record in our lifting programs. Future directions and limitations. So I'll start off with limitations. One thing that I really found in this study is it would probably be more likely to have better results if there was an equal ratio of males and females in this study. If you remember earlier, there were 24 participants of 11 women and 13 men. So it's not very equal, and especially in the groups as well, from 5 men to 3 women. So that's something that I would probably suggest is there being an equal number amount, for example, 30 participants of 15 men and 15 females, 5 each of the groups into the 3 groups. So 10 groups of 10, 5 men, 5 women, and those sorts of things. So a future direction that I think would be super cool was to expand on different sports and how it affects the TMS using their training routines and their skill training routines, such as like running and long distance runners, how this would be super important. How there's, minimal strength training, but more of the running long miles and those different sort of things. How the TMS would show in differentiation to actual strength training. Lastly, these are my references. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, just reach out to me on Canvas. This was a super cool article. I recommend reading it if you're into the strength training in the central body nervous system. Once again, thanks for watching.